Welcome back to the Locked On Snubs Network. The king of snubs is here. Jake Hatch of Locked On BYU Cougars. Honestly, I've been searching for the anger, Jake, inside of me, but the overwhelming emotion is disappointment. I am disappointed in the committee because this doesn't make any sense. I am disappointed for the fans in Provo that they don't get to see their team go to the college football playoff when they had a good enough season to do that. What is their mood right now?
I think you're right. I think it's disappointment. I think the anger kind of subsided a while ago because the writing's been on the wall. If anybody's been paying attention with this playoff committee since the rankings started coming out, Spencer, they were doing everything within their power to downgrade BYU and to find a way to leave them on the outside looking in, despite the fact that BYU had very favorable metrics, much like programs like Miami and Alabama who ultimately got into the field. I know that BYU didn't take it as far as Notre Dame did in terms of, actually not playing in a bowl game because they were all up in their feels that much about it. But I think there's a lot of disappointment around BYU, and I guess the whole thought process is maybe at some point BYU will finally get a smidgen of respect from the playoff committee.
Joining the Big 12 doesn't appear to have gotten them that. I guess they'd have to go 11-1 in the SEC. I guess.
Well, here's the thing: Alabama lost their conference title game and did not get downgraded. BYU did, and they got downgraded. Make that make sense. If we're going to have rules that are uniform, they should be applied uniformly. But this playoff committee, Hunter Yurachek looks like a complete buffoon up there with his mouth gawking half the time. He doesn't have a good answer for anything. They just don't apply these things uniformly across the board. And it's all about the Big Two. It's about the Big Ten. It's all about the SEC. It's very, very clear.
Yeah. I'm typically someone, Jake, that comes on my show and tries when the situation presents itself to tamp down the tinfoil hat conspiracy crowd.
Sure.
Because almost always the tinfoil hat conspiracy crowd is just looking for attention, is just looking to get frustration out, is just trying to have some fun, any number of those things. If you're one of those people that and I said a while ago, I set some tinfoil aside. I used tinfoil for my air fryer when I was cooking dinner earlier tonight. It was very good. Thank you for asking. And I set some aside because I said I might need to put a hat on. I don't have my hat with me because I learned that I can't make a very good looking hat that would have stayed on my head. That was what I concluded, yeah. Jake. And ultimately, I don't know how I would go about talking to a BYU fan that says ESPN was biased against us, and they didn't like us from the start, be it we're in the Big 12 or because we're BYU, whatever the reason is, there's something in there. I don't know how I would make the argument. Like, even when I don't agree with a particular perspective,
yeah,
I try to be able to at least understand where the other side is coming from. I don't know where they're coming from here. Let me read you a few things that you probably already know. Miami's strength of schedule, 45. BYU's 22. Miami's strength of record, 14. BYU's 9th. One team made the conference championship game in a better conference with a better regular season record. The other team did not. BYU's only loss is to a top 4 team, and Miami's lost to 2 unranked teams. How does one explain any of that?
You can't. It's just it's blatant. It's out in the open. And the crazy thing is, Spencer, BYU's history with ESPN up to this point have been a very, very strong one. Remember, BYU has the historical notoriety of having played the very first college football game ever televised by ESPN back in the 1980s. They played against Pitt in 1984. They also got an exclusive contract from ESPN when they went independent in 2010, and ESPN was very quick to sign them to that deal. I don't know what's changed since BYU joined the Big 12 conference, but man, the worldwide leader, they've got a problem, and they don't want to deal with BYU, it appears.
The number of times that teams' resumes were put on coverage of the college football playoff in the last 2 weeks on ESPN that showed the number 9 team, the number 10 team, and then they ignored number 11, and then they went straight to the number 12 team. What was astonishing. on the actual selection show, like this has been a bad look of a week for ESPN in a number of areas, and this is just one of them. But on the actual selection show, I don't think the words BYU or the letters BYU came out of anyone's mouth until they were listed as the second team out.
I watched the show, and you're right. They were very reticent to say those three letters, and it's been part of the deal. It feels like for weeks now. So that's why I said I think the anger, for the most part, from Cougar Nation has subsided. It's more about disappointment and just looking at it and saying, what do we have to do here? Because BYU, they're 22-4 over the past 2 seasons, Spencer, and there's a feeling that how much more do we have to prove? And you're right. Maybe it is the fact that they needed to prove it in the SEC or whatever. Here, I'm at a loss. I really don't have anything good to say other than to say that the playoff committee, they got it wrong. They did BYU wrong. They did Notre Dame wrong. And all this is going to do, it feels like, is force us to at least 16, maybe 24 teams to try and appease everybody. But even then, I'm not that big of a fan of it. I think 12 is still a pretty darn good number. The problem is the rules that have been set forth by this committee, the bylaws that they said they're going to do things by, favor 1 or 2 conferences and not all of them.
I want to go to something you touched on in there. Why do you think Notre Dame was treated wrongly?
Because I feel like they were being talked about the entire time as they were going to be the last team into the field. And then all of a sudden it was a bait and switch. And it's all because they admitted this. Okay. Hunter Yurachek said they downgraded BYU, moving Miami up just next to Notre Dame. And they held the rule. Head-to-head matters. So that moved Miami into the field. If I'm Notre Dame, yeah, I understand why Notre Dame's upset, because they were the last team in for weeks. And then when they hurt BYU, when BYU got hurt by the fact that they downgraded themselves with a loss in the conference championship game, which that rule didn't apply to Alabama, thereby Notre Dame got screwed out of their place as well.
I think that was more, I agree with that particular framing of the conversation with Notre Dame. I'm going to talk about them in the third segment on my show today. I've said for the last couple of weeks, I don't think Notre Dame should be in the playoff.
Well, and that's a valid argument, but I'm just telling you, based on how things had been projected for weeks, it's because they downgraded BYU for a loss in a conference championship game, which is not supposed to hurt you. That's what they have said themselves. Didn't hurt Alabama, it hurts BYU. And then when you put those two teams together, speaking of Miami and Notre Dame, the head-to-head comes into effect, and that's how Miami leapfrogged into the field, even though Miami did not deserve to be there.
Yeah, I think Notre Dame fans are right to feel misled by the committee. I don't think Notre Dame fans should feel we've got a resume that should put us in the playoff. No, you don't. I'm staring at your resume and comparing it to BYU. I'm sorry, it's straight up not as good. And if you took out the conference championship game, which Notre Dame is not capable of playing in, BYU would only have 1 loss, and their resume would still be significantly better. And they would still only have lost to a 1-loss top 4 team in all of college football in Texas Tech. So at least I'll give you guys a peek behind the curtain. I've already taped my segment on Notre Dame, so I've fleshed out my thoughts there, but they're not playing in a bowl game. Man. They went through it. Jake, you have kids, don't you?
I do.
How old are they?
9, 7, and 2.
Does the 2 or 7-year-old, or heck, maybe the 9-year-old, if I think back to my own childhood, ever just throw a fit and run into the corner and stomp his or her feet and say, no, I'm not playing anymore?
Is there a day that ends in Y? I'm just saying.
Yeah, just check it. That's what it feels like Notre Dame is done. BYU's going to the Pop-Tarts Bowl. I hope you know what a great matchup.
Hey,
what a great matchup between the Pop-Tarts Bowl and BYU.
Correct. And reportedly Notre Dame opted out of playing BYU in said Pop-Tarts Bowl.
Oh.
So Charmin soft, man. Sorry, Notre Dame.
They don't want to. They want you to ignore the result that was on the field, and then they want you to not realize that they would have played. Oh man, that's glorious.
I've got to give credit to Steve Loom, the longtime columnist up here in Salt Lake City for the Salt Lake Tribune and Deseret News, who said that Notre Dame, the school that gave us the underdog, overcome all odds story of Rudy, just quit. That was a tweet he put out. Masterclass from him. It is Charmin soft for Notre Dame to opt out.